Welcome into NFL Kickoff Live. It's the best hour of football talk every single Friday. We'll go around the NFL, talk about every team and every game, and we'll get you local insight that you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krabs. And guys, we're going to go straight to Thursday night football. The Jacksonville Jaguars started strong against the New Orleans Saints, but were not able to put them away until the last minute of the game, literally the last minute.
A win is a win again for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins with the Locked On Jaguars podcast. We're at your team every day. Unbelievable that the Jacksonville Jaguars hold on to win 31-24 versus the New Orleans Saints in the Big Easy. In a game, the Jaguars dominated early, but just didn't score enough points to pull away and made enough mistakes that allowed the Saints to hang around and stay in the game. Trevor Lawrence started out very hot, ironically ran the ball extremely well, even though he was banged up. But at the end of the day, the hero was Christian Kirk in the second half, and second-year player Monteric Brown, we call him Buster at corner. He played very well and had some key plays down the stretch, including the final play of the game for the New Orleans Saints. The Jaguars hold on to win 31-24. It's on to Pittsburgh. A win is a win, and they'll take it. Check me out on Locked On Jaguars every single day.
Another disappointing and disheartening loss for the New Orleans Saints. It has a lot to do with their offensive inconsistencies. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. New Orleans Saints dropping their fourth game of the season here to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the story comes to another slow start on the offensive side. Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars were cooking in the first half. The New Orleans Saints offense operated well within the 20s, within the 30s, getting into Jacksonville territory 5 times and coming up with only 6 points to show for it in the first half. That cannot be what the New Orleans Saints are or try to be throughout the remainder of this season. And maybe it's time to start talking about some play caller and some big time offensive changes in the process. If you want to know more about what those changes could look like, head over to the Locked On Saints podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Whew, guys, that was some kind of game last night. Literally, it had you on the edge of your seat. Now, Jarvis, can either the Jaguars or the Saints, based on what you saw last night, maybe as your most recent sample size, can either of them be a contender?
My quick answer for the Saints is no, because like I said, there are just too many issues. You paid $100 million to a guy like Derek Carr, who's been pretty average to above average quarterback in the NFL since he walked through that door. So, and then you talk about the play calling standpoint. I thought Ross made a great point. You talk about slow starts to games, something is wrong, right? There is, from a scheme standpoint, a game planning standpoint, Pete Carmichael just hasn't been able to figure that out. So, and Derek Carr looks like it. You know, you can just see after incompletions on whether it be third down or even when they tried to attempt it on fourth down, it was just a frustration. Dang it! Oh man, I didn't get it done. You know, so it's just too many things going on for those guys to be factors. But the Jaguars, on the other hand, this was the team coming into this season, right? The expectations were high for this team coming into the season. We said that, hey, this is going to be the team to come out of the AFC South. And I really feel like you could be a contender as long as you take care of your division. And I feel like the Jaguars have been able to do that. I like what I saw last night with Doug Peterson. He was being a little bit creative. You know, he was throwing a couple of tricks out of his bag since we're coming up on Halloween. I like how he did that. So I really feel like Saints, no, definitely not. But I think Jaguars are starting to get back into that conversation of, hey, we're going to make some noise in AFC South and we can make some in the playoffs as well.
Yeah. And Kyle, for me, one of the telling things was the way Trevor Lawrence handled things on offense when it looked like that game was starting to get away from the Jacksonville Jaguars. His communication with Christian Kirk, his communication with Travis Etienne. I felt like Derek Carr was more like he was unraveling. Like you saw him go to the sidelines and really like go in on Chris Olave. You saw him have some frustration with Michael Thomas, and it shows the disarray, the very disarray that Jarvis talked about with the Saints. But I like that the Jaguars stuck in, like Tony said, they hung in there, Kyle, and a win is a win is a win.
Yeah, what's that saying from Remember the Titans? Attitude reflects leadership, right?
Yeah.
And you're sitting here looking at the Saints, and there's a lot of finger pointing. And I mean, Anitra, you didn't even mention the one where he got in Alvin Kamara's grill, where it looked like Kamara was supposed to convert his route on the outside, and there was a pressure, and Carr throws it, expecting him that he was going to run a hitch, and Kamara kept running up the sideline. So, ample examples of New Orleans not being on the same page. And I think the biggest roadblock, I think JD said it best, is that from a coaching perspective, play calling perspective, the Saints are more talented than this. Yeah. They should not be shooting themselves in the foot to the degree that they are. And that is not a reflection, I think, of the talent. Now, I think you have questions about Derek Carr and his assimilation into new personnel and a new offense. And they've kind of been banged up a little bit along the offensive line and at running back. So I get some of it, but the talent's still there. Yeah. And they're not putting it together. And you're getting to the stage of the season now where unless you figure it out really quick, it does limit what your ceiling is going to be for this season. I guess the silver lining is we expect the NFC South to be fairly closely bunched together all season long. But the AFC South side of things with the Jaguars, I expect them to only further pull away when you look at beyond the next couple of weeks. Now they're at Pittsburgh, bye week, and then San Francisco. But then they go Tennessee. They got the Texans again. They'll be looking for revenge in that game after they lost by 3 touchdowns the first time that they played. They get the Panthers in there. They play the Titans twice. Like, this team's getting ready to leave the station as far as what their schedule is setting up for them to be. And it'll be interesting to see how their win total evens out in the end. But I do expect this Jaguars team to be playing probably in the wild card round with a home playoff game at a minimum this year.
So, Jarvis, it sounds like to me KC is comfortable putting the Jags in what we will call the pretenders spot. But if you look at the Saints, now I know you probably don't think they're contenders. I'm sorry, contenders for the Jags, of course. But when we look at the Saints, do you put them in the contender category? Do you put them in on the rise, meaning that they're kind of on the bubble and we don't really know who they are yet? Or do you put them as pretenders? Because like Kyle said, we're a third of the way into the season and maybe we know more versus less.
Can I make up a category? How about the faller off the railers? That's why I see this thing.
So not even on the rise, not pretenders. You're just off a cliff.
Off the railers. Like that's where I call the Saints. Fall off the railers. Like, because here's the thing. Like Casey makes a great point. When you talk about leadership, right? Look, who's at the helm down there? Is it Sean Payton? Sean Payton still the head coach down there? As much as I despise Sean Payton, just as a human being, like, he is a heck of a coach. And I think that, his leadership that he had for that team and how he ran things down there, it's sorely missing. It's sorely missing right now, because you have a guy, Dennis Allen, who has never really proved himself to be a head coach. He just basically been around long enough, and he was a good defensive coordinator, and then taking over after Sean Payton left. But he's just not a good head coach. And when you're talking about all of these things going on, right? You're talking about the quarterback getting in the face of your runners, your starting running back, your star running back, right? A guy who coming off suspension and dealing with stuff out on the West Coast and all that, getting into all that stuff and facing some serious charges. So, and then you have the new quarterback in the new system. All of those things just start to compound each other, and you try to put out so many fires. At the end of the day, if you're not a good leader or a great leader, you're never it's gonna continue to snowball. And that's just why I feel where the Saints are right now. Now, granted, the NFC South is a division that is clearly up for grabs. I'm not going to sit up here and say that the Falcons and the Bucs are going to just run away with the division, but like, when you're talking about setting yourself up for failure, that's what it looks like for the Saints to me.
Yeah. And Kyle, when we talk about, and we've kind of moved a little bit here and there, because we know we've got the top two pretty much in the AFC and the NFC, and then it's kind of everybody else middling and trying to get to the top. But for you, when you kind of look at one thing that I still feel like they're at the top of the food chain for the NFC, but maybe they showed some chinks in the armor. No more undefeated teams left because the 49ers went down. And granted, they had a lot of players go down, so leave that caveat. But the Eagles kind of imploded. Really, Jalen Hurts imploded, but the Eagles kind of imploded, and there went their quote-unquote undefeated season. So when you look at that, which loss last week, KC, would you say was more about their team and what they did versus who beat them, the 49ers or the Eagles?
So I think there was some hard luck for both teams.
Yeah.
Where you think about San Francisco, you played bad all day. You played against a good defense.
True.
You had 3 of your best players that went down throughout the course of the game, but then you still had a chance to get the kick at the end of the game and win the game. Your 3rd round rookie kicker missed the kick.
Yeah.
Whereas Philadelphia,
and Lance Johnson, you're right. Lane
I
Johnson,
would say that one was worse. I would say that the Eagles game was worse because you still had the ball with the lead in the final 3 minutes, and Jalen Hurts threw his worst interception. I would say, of the interceptions that he had, he tried to throw a screen to Dallas Goedert that his hands got hit as he was turning upfield, and it popped into Quinnen Williams' hands for one. And then the other one, he got hit with a pressure, and the ball popped out of his hands up into the air, and it knuckleballed over to one of these corners for the Jets. The one interception that Jalen Hurts threw that was egregiously a Jalen Hurts mistake was the one with 3 minutes left in the game that Tony Adams runs back into the red zone, and it set the Jets up to score the game-winning touchdown. So I would say the San Francisco loss was worse, or the more understandable, and the Philly loss was worse because of how that game script played out in the final 5 minutes.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you as well, because when I look at it, maybe the biggest loss, and really not lost because I think he's been practicing and he's expected to be back, was Lane Johnson. But other than that, you pretty much were at full strength. This was just kind of that implosion type of a game. It felt like for the Eagles. They just seemed just a little bit disjointed compared to the team that has been ascending since looking disjointed from week 1. But what say you, Jarvis? I mean, you look at both of these teams, you look at them going down last week. Which one do you feel is more about the team? Was it more about the Eagles and how they played, 49ers and how they played, or who they were up against?
I think it's more so what they were up against, because I really like the San Francisco 49ers looked invincible this year, right? Like, they've been putting up points and they've just been dominating up front, and then they go out and go get a guy like Randy Gregory, and he get his first sack, since being traded from the Broncos. It's just and I find it interesting that both teams went up against like pretty high level defense. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Cleveland is elite defense. It took an elite defense for San Francisco to get their first loss of the season. I think that stands out to me a little bit more because the Philadelphia Eagles, let's just be honest, y'all, they've been playing with fire the entire season. You know what I'm saying? So it's just been like they've been barely squeaking by because, our guy Hugh Douglas been trying to calm all Philadelphia fans' nerves up there in Philadelphia because they've been going crazy, but they've been finding ways to win. They just weren't able to do that this particular weekend. Like I said, like KC said, Hurts had a bad game, true enough, but for the San Francisco 49ers to take the L against a backup quarterback and PJ Walker, he still threw 2 interceptions. He turned the ball over as well, and they still were able to figure out a way to win that game. So I feel like that's the game that kind of stood out a little bit to me more because, like, San Francisco has been dominating everybody. They just been kicking everybody's butts up and down the field. But the Cleveland Browns were able to figure it out by playing elite defense and a lot of man coverage. Man, I just love defense like that. I think the defense is back. I'm going to go ahead and go on a limb and say it. Defenses are back in the NFL. They're about to take over. I don't care.
Said by the former defensive tackle. Yeah, but no prejudice, right, Kyle? No prejudice.
No bias there.
No bias there. But yeah, I thought, and you could make an argument both ways, right? Because in both of those situations, the undefeated teams had every opportunity to remain undefeated and just kind of get by, but they couldn't. Because, that Jets defense, it's something to be reckoned with as well. Absolutely. But it was interesting because my thought, too, went to, Detroit is 5-1. So where does that kind of leave, as far as the parity goes? I don't know if you guys think they've kind of leapfrogged into that top 3 that we've been talking about for the NFC. Because really, let's face it, we've been talking top 2 for the NFC since we started. But they're all 5-1 now. So I mean, Jarvis, is the playing field a little bit more level?
I gotta say so, yes, because Detroit has been pretty consistent, right? Like every game we've watched or talked about, when we talk about maybe whether it be the game when against the Falcons and the Lions, what they did against the Buccaneers just last week, it just goes to show like you know exactly what you're going to get when you go up face a Detroit Lions team. in the world did I just say that? Like, wow, consistency. Like, that is a word that we haven't used for this team in quite some time. So, I mean, we can't not put them in that top 3 in the category, or at least say, hey, they're starting to move in that same conversation as the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but you're absolutely right. We don't really use the word consistency when it comes to talking about the Detroit Lions. I don't think I've ever used the word. Yeah, right. And now we're talking consistently good. And we're going to talk on the other side of the break about 2 teams in the Dolphins and Eagles, despite what we saw in the Eagles last week, that have been consistently good and trending up. But first, Jarvis is here to tell you how to take charge of your health with Jace Medical.
This episode of NFL Kickoff Live is brought to you by Jace Medical. People, I'm telling you, everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Because here's the thing, I got small kids and I never want to be in a situation where I'm unprepared. Never want to do that, because I want to be able to make sure my kids are safe. And if they have a situation where they might need some antibiotics, I know exactly where to go to, and you should go to Jace Case as well. They provide 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a J case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. And you can get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. So Jace even handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So people, make sure that you don't get caught off guard and go to jacemedical.com and enter code locked on at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code locked on at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com.
Oh, yeah, we got a big showdown coming up this weekend between the Dolphins and the Eagles. And we talked ahead of the break about those upper echelon teams over on the NFC side. But Kyle, Miami is right up there in that conversation on the AFC side. Of course, they, along with Kansas City, are both 5-1, and Jacksonville Jaguars are kind of right there, sneakily good at 5-2. But let's talk about your Dolphins. Man, oh man, are they looking good? I was kind of surfing through some things this morning, and this is the first time since maybe his Alabama days have I heard conversation about Tua Tagovailoa taking the top award in a league. When we were having conversations about him back in college about Heisman, talking about him being the MVP. I mean, Kyle, first of all, you follow this team, you cover this team each and every day. What about this team has them ready to take on the Eagles in a tough environment like Philadelphia?
I think that the loss that Miami took this year, they went to Buffalo in week 4.
Yes.
And the Dolphins spoke, the coaching staff and the players spoke after the game about how that environment challenged the timing of their offense because they're such a shift and motion-oriented offense.
Yes.
They have motion at the snap on over 60% of their offensive plays. It's like a crazy high number, and a lot of that comes with timing. Well, they go to Buffalo, they get this raucous crowd that's really loud. The first 5 possessions of the game are all touchdown drives, and then Miami gets out of sync a little bit. And they spoke about how their communication and their timing was impacted by what they experienced in Buffalo. Well, they spoke about it in week 4. You've now had 3 weeks to think about the next road game environment you were going to go to, knowing that it was Sunday Night Football against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
What have you done with your communication system, whether that's hand signals, nonverbal cues, silent count, whatever? What have you done to address how it impacted you in Buffalo and do it differently this week? And I think that's the biggest change for something that they endured earlier this season, because the talent's there. You look at the offensive production, you look at the speed, you look at the explosive plays, everything compounds on top of itself between the skills of Tua Tagovailoa with the skills of the receiver, with Mike McDaniel's play calling. This has been one of the better performing offensive lines in football on both fronts, with the run game and the pass game. And that was not necessarily expected at the beginning of the year. There are a ton of Dolphins fans that had a million questions about the offensive line. And Teron Armstead's on injured reserve right now. And they're still performing at a high level. So the talent's there. It's the ability to take what you do and put it into an environment that's a big game environment where you're not at home. and apply it. And I think that's the big question for Miami coming in. But I think the fact that they've already done it once gets them in a better position to do it against the Eagles.
Yeah, now JD, Philly is on fire right now. Still, it's been about 5 days and they are still having meltdowns about what happened with the Eagles. But they should look at Jalen Hurts.
Meltdowns.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But they should look at Jalen Hurts' record, because his only back-to-back loss situation since he started in the league was early in his first year. It was October of 2021. So it's been 2 years since him being a starter under center for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's taken back-to-back L's. What about a reset from the debacle from last weekend can allow the Eagles to get a win this weekend with a team like Miami, to Kyle's point, that's really functioning on all cylinders, and they just continue to improve week by week?
Run the quarterback. Call quarterback runs, not scrambles and everything. You're in trouble and all that stuff. I'm talking about call quarterback runs, because here's what that's going to do in the game like this. When you're coming up against a high-powered offense like Tua and all those guys and all those track runners they got on their offense,
Yes.
like those, you want to keep those guys off the field. So you want to talk about ball control, and you have the offensive line to do it. They're one of the better offensive lines, like KC mentioned, in the National Football League. So you're going to have to go up there and say, hey, we're going to take the air out of the ball, and we're going to convert in the red zone, and we're not going to turn the ball over, because, there's no formula for a quarterback throwing the ball as much as Hurts did and turn the ball over like he did, though, because those were just bad turnovers, and you can put your defense in bad situations. Jalen Carter is hopefully going to be back this week. That man, you bring the man back into the situation like that. Those are some of the things that can help you dominate the game like you need to do on both sides of the football. So if they can take the air out of the football, those call quarterback runs, don't necessarily put it all on Jalen Hurts' arm, to get the job done, because we know he can get it done doing both, right?
Mm-hmm.
They almost won that Super Bowl. They were really close to getting it done. Just getting it done. So now it's just a matter of getting a little bit more of that style offense. I know you got a new offense coordinator and everything like that. I know that guy's out the door, but you need to start implementing some of those things that brought Jalen Hurts to this point, right? This is what brought him to that point, using his legs as well, and have an MVP caliber situation at the quarterback spot. So
Exactly.
I think that they can do that.
Yeah, that'll definitely be an intriguing matchup Sunday night. Another interesting game this week will be with the second place Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that not many people believed, including Steeler Nation right here, in before the season, and the Los Angeles Rams, as they look to try and stay relevant in a very quirky NFC West, of course, outside of the 49ers. Locked On Rams host Doug McCain joined our Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter to break down this can't-miss game.
When they're able to put together a game plan, they limit guys. If you go back to the last time they played the Rams, and that was when they had backup quarterbacks in the year 2019, when they didn't have, they had Mason Rudolph starting that game because Ben Roethlisberger was out for the season that year. You go back to that game, Cooper Kupp held to 0 yards in that game. Aaron Donald only got 1 sack in that game. You thought that he'd get a lot more against that. They tried to neutralize him as best they can. The Steelers recognize that guys like that, they're going to be game breakers. They're going to be guys who make plays, and you have to understand that. But you have to scheme around trying to limit them as much as possible. That's where the Steelers, I think, are going to do as much as they can to say, hey, you're going to be able to get the ball to them, but to get it to them, you're going to have to work, and you have to keep working, and you're going to have to start making more risks at it. That's where I think the Steelers, they can work on doubling Cooper Kupp a little bit more, but the biggest thing is they have to take away the quicker throws for Stafford, like you were talking about. He wants to get the ball out quick. They have to take that away, force him to hold on to the ball, and make him have to trust his offensive line against the Steelers' pass rush. They do that. I think that's their best chance to try to counterbalance what the Rams love to do in the passing game, because Matt Stafford, if you give him space in that pocket, he's going to kill you.
100%. I think that's absolutely one of the biggest keys. I think we look back on Monday, we evaluate this game, is did they get the ball out quick? Did you run enough to keep that Steelers defense honest? If you do those two things, then you give you a chance to have some balance. Because you have to have some semblance of a running game in this one, because if you have the offense relying too much on explosives, it could be a miserable day for Matthew Stafford getting to the quarterback. So I'm definitely looking at that one. Also, Christopher, I have to point out this, and it pains me to say this. Of course, Shout out to the Ramley, big Rams fan here, but Steelers in town, there's going to be a lot of terrible towels. They might be selling the terrible towels at the Rams concessions during this one. Okay, so it's going to be a factor. You're probably going to see over 50% Steelers fans. Don't doubt that, but I still think this game is really up in the air. I think you look at the Rams offense, the momentum they built, the defense that has been surprisingly close to league average. They've been good in a lot of different categories that can neutralize this Steelers offense, averaging 15.8 points per game. I think this one is going to be a lower scoring affair. I don't anticipate them lighting up the scoreboard. I don't know if you throw out predictions on your show for the predictions episode for the crossover, but I got the Rams winning this one 24-17.
I usually hold off my predictions for Friday because I try to build up suspense to what my picks will be. But I will say, I think this is going to be a very close contest. I think both teams are still fighting to be the other teams that they want to be by the end of the season. And I think that the Rams, their strength in the passing game, it hits right at the Steelers' weakness as far as covering right now. But I also think the Steelers' strength as far as getting after the quarterback hits at the Rams' weakness as far as protecting the quarterback. And that's where I'm just not 100% sure just yet is where I fall in this prediction. But to your point about, the Steelers fans being there, people need to understand. I think people in Pittsburgh have come to know this, but people nationally don't understand. Steelers fans aren't traveling. They're just everywhere.
He's right. I went to a Steelers-Rams game a couple years ago in LA, and I thought I was in Pittsburgh. That said, Kyle, I think it's interesting that the guys talked a little bit about Cooper Kupp, who obviously has been back now. I think this is his second game back, which is great for that offense for Matt Stafford. But there's another guy who's really been on fire for that team, who the Steelers are going to have to definitely make sure that they're watching out for, right? And I'm thinking about like Joey Porter Jr. They're looking at elevating him to kind of beef up that secondary. But I mean, what do you think about that passing game and that passing attack for Matt Stafford? Is it more potent than what that secondary for the Steelers can do?
Yeah,
If
the Steelers are going to have success defending the Rams passing game, I think you do need more contributions from Joey Porter and banking on that youth and the potential and how he was widely regarded as a first-round prospect that just barely slipped out of the first round. Because the athleticism of the corners that Pittsburgh has otherwise leaves a little something to be desired. The athleticism of the linebackers that are defending the middle of the field for Pittsburgh leaves something to be desired. And Matthew Stafford's playing at a really high level right now. Yeah. So Stafford throwing the ball to Puka Nacua, having Cooper Kupp back, that combo of guys, regardless of what other injuries the Rams have on the offensive side of the ball, with Kyron Williams being banged up, I don't think it matters because I look at Pittsburgh's back seven, and yeah, you've got Minkah Fitzpatrick back there, but you need somebody to help you change the math and be able to send confidently extra attention towards one of the other receivers. And if it's not going to be Joey Porter that steps up and provides that for them, I don't know that they have the horses to do it.
Yeah. And Jarvis, when we talked a little bit earlier about Dolphins Eagles, one of the things that you mentioned that would be in the Eagles' favor is time of possession. And with a guy like Matt Stafford having rhythm in that passing game, you kind of want to keep him off the field as well. But if you keep him off the field, Steelers, then what are you guys going to do? Like, what is Kenny Pickett going to do? George Pickens has kind of been Captain Sava for Kenny Pickett, but he's got to step up the level of his play, and they've got to see more from their run game, from their 1-2 punch. If they're, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, they've got to see more from that 1-2 punch, I think, if they're going to have an opportunity to get this win. But what do you think is their best path to a win?
It's going to have to be getting your Najee Harris and more involved because he hasn't rushed for a touchdown this year.
Right.
And it seems like Jaylen Warren is kind of taking over that whole lead back situation, especially when you talk about what he can do in the passing game from that standpoint. So, yeah, it's like the Steelers offense we've been talking about on this show, ever since we started this bad boy, about how the weirdness of this offense, because they have weapons. Obviously, Deontay Johnson goes down. I think he's in the practice window right now, so we'll see whether or not he's going to be able to return. But you still have guys. You got George Pickens, you got Freiermuth, you got Jaylen Warren, you got Najee Harris. They have weapons to work with. It just seems like they just can't quite figure it out. And I think that they're going to have to, simplify this thing a little bit. I feel start running the football, get back to some of that old school Steeler Nation type offense, running the football and play action and finding your tight end, because like you said, that's what you have. You might not have your other game breaking wide receiver and Deontay Johnson, but you do have a guy in Freiermuth that you can hit on those intermediate routes. You do have a running back you can pass to out of the backfield and start working some screens and simplify, getting Kenny Pickett in a rhythm, because that quarterback class is not looking good right now. You're talking about Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and Kenny Pickett,
which was supposed to be the second coming of the greatest class. So quite interesting to see what they're going to do. And you're absolutely right, Najee Harris. They've got to get him more involved. And to your point, not just in the run game, but he is a pass catcher. So take advantage of the pass catcher that you have. Now, when we come back, we're going to chop it up more about some contenders in a minute. But first, Jarvis is here to tell you guys about FanDuel.
Guys, I'm going to let you know that this episode of the NFL Kickoff Live show is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, all the people who haven't gone to FanDuel and you've been just trying to figure out how you can make some more money, how about this? Go to FanDuel.com right now. And all you got to do is drop $5. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. $5, and you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. And guess what you can do with those bonus bets? What can you do, Jarvis? You can use those to put money on the spreads, the player props, over-unders, and much, much more. I'm telling you guys, the FanDuel app is super safe. It's easy to use. You got to worry about anybody getting all information or anything to that knowledge, right? So here's the website is FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. LOCKEDON. FanDuel. It is the official sportsbook betting partner of the NFL.
Now, guys, we talked a little bit about the Dolphins and Eagles earlier in the show. Kyle gave his perspective. Jarvis, you chimed in as well. But what about the Eagles side? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The FanDuel line is 2.5 in favor of Philly. Will the Eagles be able to cover that? Here to sell us why is Locked On Eagles host Gino Camilleri.
Gino Camilleri here from the Locked On Eagles podcast, here to sell you why on the Philadelphia Eagles and why they're going to cover the 2.5 point spread against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. Well, first, it's a Sunday Night Football game. That means America's going to be tuned in. That means Vegas is going to be very honed in on this one. Usually these primetime games, that number, it's there for a reason. 2.5 points. What comes into play? A field goal. An end of the game field goal seems what might likely be the reason why the Eagles win this football game. It could be a boat race a majority of the time. We know Miami can put up a ton of points. But can the Philadelphia Eagles and their run offense that at time has choked away the clock get back to what they do best and control the football? The reason I say the Eagles can cover this spread is if it comes down to a field goal at the end of the game in a tied game scenario and the Eagles have the ball with, let's say, anywhere of 6 minutes and above, the Eagles have shown that they can run that clock out and get it into a situation where they can come home and win this football game. But why do I say the run game can be this effective? Well, if you look at Miami, currently they have the 25th ranked DVOA defense when it comes to the rush, 22nd against the pass. The Eagles are going to have to restrict Miami when it comes to the amount of possessions that they have. I'm going to ride with the over. I think a lot of points are scored, but I also think this game is very close. The over is at 51.5. That means that a team is going to have to score 27. Another one is going to have to score 26. Let's say the Eagles can win this one 30-27. The Eagles win. You're going to cover that 2.5. And I think it comes at the hands of the Eagles possessing the clock, controlling the run game, and winning where it matters in the trenches. I'm Gino Camilleri. Join us all 5 days each and every week over at Locked On.
Kyle, you riding with Gino that Philly will be able to cover?
No. Now, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. I think the pathways for Philadelphia to win the game are there, and I think Gino's absolutely right about Philadelphia. Was really surprised that they called 45, even more than 45 dropbacks last week versus just 20 rushes is what they ended up with, and some of those were Jalen Hurts scrambles in a game that they led the entire time. So it was kind of a weird script for them last week. But nevertheless, just to play devil's advocate, that Dolphins rush defense gets hammered because they gave up 233 yards against the Chargers in week 1. They're averaging 90 yards a rush allowed team yards in the 5 games since. So that has been something where you have seen some improvements. Carolina kind of got them on their heels in the first quarter of this past game, but they were down 14-0 and then still buckled down and had a strong performance against the run for the totality of the game. So I think Miami's rush defense, while I know the efficiencies in DVOA and yards per carry, it doesn't look great, but it's because the Chargers put up 233 on them in week 1. I think that you've seen some improvement there, and I think Jalen Hurts is going to have to win this game if the Eagles are going to win this game.
Well, Jarvis, I got to tell you that I cannot wait because that was such a reaction from Kyle. I can't wait to hear your reaction about the Packers and Giants. The Green Bay Packers find themselves road favorites this week as they face an embarrassing Denver Broncos team. The FanDuel line on this one is only 1.5 here to sell us why we should be taking Green Bay as Locked On Packers host Peter Bukowski.
The Green Bay Packers are going to cover the 1.5 point spread at FanDuel. Let me tell you why. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers. And does the number 70 mean anything to you? That's how many points the Miami Dolphins hung on the Denver Broncos, who just happened to be the Packers' opponent, over whom they are favored by 1.5 points. The Packers happen to be coming off their bye week. And for all the questions about Jordan Love and this offense, the Packers are in the top half of the league in EPA per play. The last time they faced a defense even close to as bad as the Denver Broncos defense, they scored over 30 on the Chicago Bears. That also happened to be the last time Aaron Jones was this healthy for a football game. And they did that without Christian Watson, who is himself healthy headed into this game. The Packers are rested. They are getting their top playmakers back, and they are facing a historically bad defense. That is what this Denver Broncos team is. Historically bad. Oh, and the offense couldn't even get to 95 passing yards last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Packers cover 1.5.
All right, Jarvis. Peter told us how he really felt, so I'm going to ask you, how do you really feel?
I think that 1.5 is a lock. What's the string? What is it? Super lock, a 7 lock, a 8
Oh,
lock,
yeah.
lock, whatever it is.
Right. Level 1 lock. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, whatever it is, say, hey, yeah, they're going to cover this squad. I promise you they're going to cover it because like Jordan Love is kind of been exposed to these last few games, guys. Like the offensive line hasn't protected well. He's been sacked 8 times, in the last 3 games, and he's turned the ball over. He had 6 interceptions and a fumble. So it's just been kind of spiraling a little bit. So when you talk about being able to get a guy like Christian Watson back, we know what he was able to do last year. And as far as production goes with Aaron Rodgers. So we know his capabilities. You got Romeo Doubs that can, get the job done as well. So I think that when you have a situation where your young quarterback is struggling, hey, you get back to the basics. I hate to try to take offenses back to 1999 and the early 2000s, but that's what it is. When you have a young quarterback who's struggling, you're struggling in protection and being able to do that. I really feel like you get back to the basics because we've seen Jordan Love have some success, right? In that first 2 games against the Falcons, you had those 6 touchdowns and no interceptions. He played clean, right? But I think that now you kind of get back into it, get him in some similar plays where he had some success, and make sure they're able to do that. So I think that if they do those things, I think they're definitely covering this game.
Now, Jarvis, you can't say the 99 and the 2000s and think that I will not catch that. But anyway, Kyle, when we talk about this team,
I've been listening to Chad. I've been listening to 400.
You just caught it like it's 2 seconds late.
It's been in my brain.
Work with me, Jarvis. Work with me. But anyway, Kyle, I think you're working with me. I think you're probably a few minutes ahead of him. So I'm going to ask you this question. In all honesty, and it's kind of weird because you were thinking of when the Green Bay Packers kind of made it clear that they were ready to part ways with Aaron Rodgers, that Jordan Love was ready to really take over the reins and at least help them to kind of get back to some semblance of glory. But what do you make of his performance thus far this season?
I don't envy Jordan Love for having to step in for Aaron Rodgers. I don't envy Jordan Love for having an offensive line that's now has David Bakhtiari out for the year. Again, that's one of the best left tackles in football. He has not been healthy. Elton Jenkins was banged up for them and has missed some time as well in the first month and a half of the season. So that's your best two offensive linemen. And then, oh, by the way, Aaron Jones has missed a bunch of time. A.J. Dillon does not look like he's got anything beyond first gear anymore. It's bad as far as what he brings from a juice perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have first and second year players at every roster spot at wide receiver and tight end. And it's like, in what way did you set Jordan Love up to be successful? So he sat, he learned the offense, but I didn't think the process from the personnel that they had, aside of maybe the injuries that they've incurred on the offensive line and Aaron Jones, was particularly good. You have a developing quarterbacks that you've surrounded with developing players in the passing game where there's no consistency. He's learning how to do it, and the guys who are doing everything else around him are learning how to do it too. And I think that creates this vacuum of volatility where you've seen it with Green Bay, and the turnovers have come in bunches, and it's been really stop and go. And I agree with Jarvis. If they're going to get it right, let's wind the clock back a little bit. Let's play some old school football. Let's let Aaron Jones, you're paying him $12 million a season, let him be the guy, because it can't be A.J. Dillon based off what he's shown us in the first month and a half of the season. So I sympathize with Jordan Love. It needs to be better, but I also sympathize with what he's had to work with so far.
Yeah. And speaking of wanting to turn the clock back, I'm sure the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders would want to do the same from their glory days. But right about now, not the top of the NFC East, the bottom of the division. The Commanders come in on FanDuel as 3-point road favorites, which isn't really a surprise to anyone, but here to still sell us why the Giants can be a factor in this game, our Locked On Giants host, Patricia Traina.
The New York Giants are a 2.5-point underdog at home against the Washington Commanders this weekend. But if you're looking for a reason to roll with Big Blue, look no further than the Giants' philosophical shift on defense the last couple of weeks regarding the blitz. New York has blitzed under 20% of the time in each of its last two games, instead getting home with a 4-man rush. Why is that significant? Because Washington quarterback Sam Howell has completed 56.9% of his pass attempts while also throwing 4 interceptions when under pressure this season. Howell, on the other hand, has performed a lot better against the blitz. When he's been blitzed, he has completed 61.4% of his pass attempts and has 2 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. If the Giants can make the young quarterback uncomfortable, that will go a long way towards putting the ball back in their offense's hands, or hopefully a slimmed-down passing game that will feature receivers Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson, along with running back Saquon Barkley and tight end Darren Waller, can push the Giants towards the end zone a little bit more often than they have in recent weeks.
Well, Patricia almost convinced us, Jarvis. Almost.
She did. No offense to Patricia, but I think this is the perfect matchup for the Commanders, right? Because we know how awful the Giants' offensive line is, right? Yeah. They've just been trying to figure it out. Like, they are just like Kyle sympathizes with Jordan Love. I sympathize with the Giants personnel staff and try to piece together something to protect the doggone quarterback. I'm glad they had Tyrod Taylor, who can move around a little bit more, more so than Danny Dimes. But I think that with the Washington Commanders and what they were able to do against the Falcons last week, I think that they can continue to, put the quarterback on the ground. And I think this is a horrible matchup for the Giants, because we know all of the talent that they have up and down that line, from Jonathan Allen, and Deron Payne and Chase Young, all those guys that can get to the quarterback. And I think that that's what's going to be one of the things why I feel like the Giants aren't going to be able to cover that spread.
Now, notice, Kyle, we came out with FanDuel having the Commanders as 3-point favorites. But the rest of our commentary was, that's not a surprise, but that Patricia was supposed to sell us why the Giants can be a factor, not win, but be a factor in the game. Is there a path to winning this game for the Giants?
I think so. I think it involves bottling the inspired effort that the defense had last week against the Buffalo Bills. And there were some storylines in that between Brian Daboll playing against his old team and Tyrod Taylor, and he used to quarterback the Buffalo Bills and got them to the playoffs, and then they cast him out. And I think there's certainly some emotional factors that played into why the Giants played as well as they did. But the crazy stat that I have for this game is that Giants quarterbacks have been sacked 33 times so far this season. And that's still less than the amount of times that Sam Howell has been sacked this season. Sam Howell's been sacked 34 times.
4 times, yeah.
This season.
It's so crazy.
It's just the offensive line. So when nobody can block, I think it does kind of create this chaos vacuum where it's a one bounce of the ball, right? One strip sack of Sam Howell that the Giants can run back for a touchdown. That might be all you need if the Giants are going to have success with Wink Martindale and they are going to disrupt Sam Howell and prevent any kind of sustained movement of the football. It could be that kind of game. And if the Giants are going to win, I think it has to be that kind of game where they don't shoot themselves in the foot, but they take advantage of spotty pass protection for Washington and what they provide. And Howell likes to hold the ball and try and push it downfield and make things happen. And if you could be opportunistic in those instances, I think that is your pathway for the Giants to cover the 3.
Indeed. And I'm sure all of our executive producers hope that that path actually comes to fruition. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some more bottom dwellers, but we're going to end on a high note, giving you some predictions for some of our biggest games. But before we do that, Jarvis is going to tell you a little bit about Prize Picks.
What's going on, good people? Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks. This episode of NFL Kickoff Live is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. I'm telling y'all, you need to get in on this. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. It's just that simple, guys. I've been testing my skills on Prize Picks this football season, and it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. No more waiting till the end of the season to try to collect your money, going to go knock on somebody's door saying, hey, man, I need my money. I won in a fantasy football league. Daily fantasy sports is made easy by Prize Picks, guys. And you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. That's it. I'm telling you, they even offer weekly promotions that can lead up to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. We're going up each Tuesday. Prize Picks discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. LOCKEDONNFL. You know how to spell that. I'm telling you. And you're going to get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
You know, we talk about fantasy, right? And the fact that if you're going with Prize Picks, that's a good look for you. And the fact that we are a little less than 2 weeks away from the trade deadline for the NFL, talking about movement across the leagues. Now, it's a good time to look to upgrade your fantasy roster, maybe see some movement in your league as well. You might have some gems that could help you get more value in a trade. So what players should we be selling high in fantasy this week? Locked On Fantasy host Michelle Majuk is here to tell you how.
There are 3 players that I think you need to sell high on, trade away prior to Sunday morning. First off, being Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts. I know he's had back-to-back good fantasy weeks, something he actually hasn't done in a couple of years now. And it's hard to trade away a producing tight end. I get that, but he's not even the top producing tight end on his own team. Jonnu Smith is actually averaging over 2 more fantasy points per game in PPR leagues than Kyle Pitts since week 2. And with Kyle Pitts, I mean, pass production has not been great. He's played 16 games since the start of last season. And over that time, he's had 3 or fewer receptions in 11 of those 16 games, fewer than 50 receiving yards in 13 of those 16 games, and 3 total touchdowns over that time span. I don't envision Kyle Pitts is going to score that much more than the other low-end tight ends that you can get off the waiver wire and kind of stream. So in that case, I would rather just trade away Kyle Pitts high right now and upgrade at another position. Another guy I'm looking to trade away this week is wide receiver George Pickens of the Steelers. Pickens posted a career high 130 receiving yards in week 5 prior to the Steelers bye. But now I think is a good time to trade him. There's no doubt that he's extremely talented, but he's stuck with Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett. 2 guys that they can't get their crap together, right? And they only sometimes remember George Pickens even exists. So in that case, I don't love how highly inconsistent he's been for fantasy. And then you also have Deontay Johnson coming back from IR. Deontay Johnson is the lead wide receiver on this team. He's the top target guy, and he's going to steal targets away from George Pickens, which is going to make him even more inconsistent. So in that case, I'm looking to sell him high off of that career game he had in week 5. And then last up, it's Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson. He actually had a pretty nice game last week, and I think that's why you can sell him right now. It was against a really weak Raiders run defense, but he came through with a good fantasy week. But the 3 weeks prior, he scored a combined 15.6 fantasy points in a full PPR league from weeks 3 through 5. Like, he was unusable. He was destroying your team. And the issue is last week he had a nice fantasy game, but he still only had 10 carries in that game. He was still losing a ton of snaps and carries to Ezekiel Elliott. The Patriots offense has been just horrendous this year, and Stevenson's workload has just been sporadic, and he's been inefficient. And I don't want to deal with that inconsistency all season long. I think this week right now, with 6 teams on bye, so many running backs being injured, there's going to be fantasy managers willing to pay up for a startable running back this week, and you can actually get really great value for Stevenson. And I don't know if you're going to continue to be able to get that after this week. So sell high on him now while you can.
Trade Kyle Pitts. Jarvis, trade Kyle Pitts in your fantasy.
No, that's finally starting to get some type of rhythm. So
Yeah.
I think that Kyle Pitts is a guy that I would hold on to, because here's the thing. When we think about, we've had so many conversations about ad nauseum about what Kyle Pitts should be bringing to the table on a weekly basis on Sundays at 1:00 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, whether they're out on the road as well. So, and I think that Desmond Ridder is finally starting to come around as far as like, okay, now I'm finding my guy. Now that he's lining up in line and he's lining up in that slot, I can get him the ball, and Arthur Smith is able to, scheme up, some good plays for him so he can get him the football. And I think that, last week he was able to get into the end zone, and he was actually lined up on the outside on that particular play and beat double coverage. So yeah, I would hold off on trading Kyle Pitts if I'm sitting there with him, because like, I know you had to be patient because I had him last year, and I'm just like, I don't know about this one. So, but yeah, I will hold on to Kyle Pitts for now.
Now, Kyle, another one that had me kind of scratching my head, trade George Pickens. And I can definitely hear Michelle's rationale, because Deontay Johnson is essentially, well, they're kind of 1A and 1B, just to be honest, when he's in. But Deontay Johnson, Deontay is not a threat yet because he's coming back if he actually gets to play. So I don't know if it's the time. Do you think it's the time to trade George Pickens?
I think there's maybe a nice opportunity to cash out high long term. If you feel like, well, and now Pat Freiermuth's banged up, and it sounds like he's going to miss a little bit of time. So you've got Deontay coming back, and Pat's going out, and Jarvis is talking about how we need to get Najee Harris more involved to fix the offense and play more sustainable football, which I generally agree with. So you're looking at George. He's got over 400 yards from scrimmage, and I think that's like far and away the highest on the Pittsburgh offense thus far. If they are going to find balance at some point this season, maybe this is kind of the opening of that window to cash out high there, if you think that's the case. But I actually really agree with Michelle on Ramondre Stevenson. And if you're looking to cut your losses, you might not be able to sell high here. But they got the Bills and the Dolphins the next 2 weeks at 1-5 already. He's logged his 2 lowest carry totals of the season the last 2 weeks with 8 and 10 carries respectively. He's averaging they're averaging as a team less than 3.5 yards per carry. And then you look at what they have down the stretch when you think about playoff time, and they play the Bills, the Jets, and the Chiefs in a 4-week stretch at the end of the season too. So yeah, I'd be selling on Ramondre Stevenson, whatever you can get. I'd probably be trying to get it at this stage for him.
Yeah, he's the one I agree with Jarvis as well, that I think it would be a good look to go ahead and trade Ramondre at this point. What do you think, Jarvis?
Yeah, I actually have him on one of my fantasy teams, so I'm kind of trying to figure this thing out. So yeah, I think Michelle sold me. I'm sold on that, because here's the thing: that offense is bad. Like, you don't know what you're gonna get from on a week out basis. On that New England Patriots coach team. Excuse me. I think there is something there that we have to understand, like what's going on in there, and you kind of got to look at the whole landscape. I understand the whole digging into the numbers and all that stuff, but look at it from a long-term standpoint. Okay, does Ramondre Stevenson going to give me the best chance to win my game on a weekly basis? And if you kind of having the foresight to say, you know what, let me see what I can get for him coming off of a good performance against the Raiders. So yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, and I might actually try to reach out to some folks to see if I can trade him on my squad. Thanks,
I see. So I'm going to challenge you guys, right? Because we said we were going to end the show on a positive note. So somehow we're going to find a silver lining. And I don't mean that like I'm slanting in the direction of the Raiders, but we're going to find a silver lining in this upcoming game where there's no Jimmy G, there's no Justin Fields. We just got the notification Fields is officially out for this game. Raiders and Bears are playing with Brian Hoyer and Tyson Bagent, respectively. Kyle, ugly of a game could it be, or do you see anything that gives you some hope that this could be a good game?
This is one of the games that makes me really thankful that I'm a draftnik and I do the college scouting all year long, because Tyson Bagent at quarterback for the Bears, really fun story, played in the PSAC. And if you don't know what the PSAC is, it's like the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference. And it like puts down in Pittsburgh and Westchester, and Tyson Bagent played in that level of competition, and he went to the Senior Bowl this past winter and really made an impression. He's a really fun story. He's had some really bright flashes on tape. He had some bright moments at the Senior Bowl. I had a chance to talk to him down there in Mobile, and I was impressed with his football IQ and just how well he grasped the game for coming from that level of competition. So my silver lining is this is a player with a fascinating story that has a really cool opportunity to do something with it in the midst of what is looking like a sunk season in Chicago. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what he does with it. And we'll see what kind of production that leads to. I don't know my expectations as a whole for Chicago offensively are particularly high, but I'm rooting for Tyson to have a good performance just because he's somebody who kind of embodies the pathway that a lot of players, not your household names that everybody knows or are on billboards, but a lot of players and the journey that they take to try to achieve their elite dreams and live in and play in the NFL. That's the Tyson Bagent story. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. And, the wily veteran, Jarvis, will be there for the Raiders in place of Jimmy G. Any silver lining there, maybe too?
I mean, maybe
or another silver lining.
I guess maybe Tyson Bagent can strive to be Brian Hoyer. If he can say, hey, I was like Brian, I had a Brian Hoyer type of career, I think Tyson Bagent would be doing well for himself, because we know he's come in different situations and played really well. And so, I mean, that's what you expect. So I think that, Brian Hoyer maybe looking on the other side of the field saying, hey, I remember when I was that kid, nobody knew who I was. And I'm coming in, and having a good, being able to come in and have a solid NFL career. And I think that's what all Tyson strives to have. And like I said, if he can have a career like Brian Hoyer has had, yeah, he'd be doing well for himself.
Tanitra, I got your silver lining for the Raiders.
Okay, let's go for it.
Josh Jacobs is going to average more than 4 yards per carry for the first time this season against that Bears rushing defense with those young guys on that defensive line. Jacobs obviously won the rushing title last year.
Right.
His high watermark for yards per carry this season is 3.6 at a game. He's going to get over 4 this week. So if you're a Josh Jacobs fantasy owner to kind of tie everything back together, there's your silver lining.
That might be a good look. That definitely might be a good look. And, Jarvis, Devontae Adams had some words, some very, very strong words this week about what his expectations are. So sometimes, as you know, as a former player, you hear from that player and it makes a world of difference in terms of how you approach the game.
So, yeah, give him the football. I mean, I think that's all he was saying. Like, hey, give me the rock, and I know we're going to win some, continue to win some games. That's it.
Yeah. And that's what I think as well. It was just really sort of one of those calls. And I think, Kyle, you mentioned it earlier. It was the staff for the Miami Dolphins, but it was also the players for the Miami Dolphins. And sometimes you hear those players and it makes a world of difference. So we will definitely have our eyes on some big games this weekend. Know you guys will have your eyes on it too. As always, thank you guys for stopping by NFL Kickoff Live, and we will see you on the Locked On Podcast Network next week.